How's it going, everyone? It's Avi from WeatherSponge 5000, and in this video, we're going to focus on our next two potential snowstorms that are likely to impact the Northeast as well as the Midwest in the near future as we approach the Thanksgiving timeframe, and determine how much snow you should see in each area, and if there's a possibility it could affect your area potentially a little bit further southward, such as the Northeast cities. Maybe in the more long-term future you might experience snow. We're going to talk about all that in this video, but first, let's take a look at the European model's latest forecast run. So we do have a low pressure system just off the northeast coast that's bringing a pretty heavy amount of rain and gustier winds, bringing the cooler air further southwards. So the temperatures are a little bit cold than what you'd expect for this time of the year in the Northeast, while you see that for the western half of the United States, it's much warmer than average for the most part. We do have a low pressure system now moving up the Pacific coast, and this could potentially be our next major winter storm for the Northeast. So if we were to continue to move forward with the European model's forecast, the European model expects the storm system to move into the Rocky Mountain ranges. We do see plenty of snowfall in the higher elevation. So if you're into skiing, if you want to do that on this Thanksgiving weekend potentially, then this might be a good weekend to do it, because there's going to be plenty of snow in the higher elevations associated with this storm system. But continuing to move forward, we do see that not only will this bring moisture to the Rocky Mountain ranges, but plenty of cold air just behind it, and that should create an unstable environment right over the Midwest for our next potential snowstorm to develop. And continuing to move forward with the forecast, it seems like there's going to be a strong enough ridge to a point where the most of the snow will be located on the northern edge of this storm system. We're going around 60 hours out, so there still could be some minor changes in the forecast from here up until 48 to 72 hours from now. But it seems like the most likely scenario is that this ridge will be strong enough for at least the coastal Northeast to primarily experience a rain event. I wouldn't be surprised if you do see maybe some flurries on the backside of this storm system, but not anything major when it comes to snowfall. But moving forward with the forecast, we do see that this ridge is parked over here, but we still have the remnants of this low pressure system moving up the Canadian coast. That's bringing just enough of a strong northerly flow that's going to leave the cold air a little bit further southward than if the ridge were just by itself and the winds of the ridge were strong enough to push this northwesterly flow or northeasterly flow away. So we're going to see this cold air linger around for a bit, just enough for the interior Northeast to potentially see some major snow out of this storm system. And we do see just to the north of this storm system, there's another clipper system moving through that's going to help amplify the cold air just to the north of this storm system, because if it weren't for this clipper system, then the cold air likely would have been too weak for any sort of snowfall to occur in the Northeast. But since this past trough moving through the Northeast is going to bring just enough of a strong northeasterly flow, it's likely that it's going to bring just enough Arctic air for snow to occur in the interior Northeast, especially in the higher elevations. So we do see continuing to move forward. We see some mixing right around northern Michigan, and we see some snowfall occurring right over the Pocono Mountains and a large portion of upstate New York, right over the Catskills as well as Adirondacks. In terms of Albany, I still think it's going to be fairly difficult for you guys to see accumulating snowfall, mainly due to the fact that although much of upstate New York is seeing snowfall, Albany is still right around sea level when it comes to elevation. And plus, thanks to the fact that Albany is a city, cities tend to be a lot warmer, or not a lot warmer, but just enough warmer to a point where the temperature difference between, let's say, just 30 miles to the west and then right over Albany is going to be big enough to a point where Albany will at most probably experience some mixing or some snow, but that won't stick on the ground. While for the rest of upstate New York, it likely will be a full-on snowstorm in the higher elevations especially. And moving forward with the forecast, we do see that much of the Interstate 95 corridor cities avoid the snowfall. New York City not getting anything. Boston, maybe you could get a mixing, but that's about it. Most likely it'll be entirely a rain event for Boston, as it seems like the southerly flow from associated from this pressure gradient between this ridge and this low will be a little little bit too strong, and the northerly flow just north of this storm won't be strong enough to bring that cold air further southward to bring impacts when it comes to snowfall over the Interstate 95 corridor city. So this will likely be a rain event for the Interstate 95 corridor cities, and it could be heavy at times thanks to the instability that this storm is expected to encounter as it continues ahead further eastward. So you might want to watch out for that possibility of flash flooding or even just regular river flooding in some localized areas, because rain will likely be heavy by the time we approach the Wednesday timeframe, just on the eve of Thanksgiving. So you want to be sure to pay close attention to that. And also for travel this Thanksgiving weekend, this is definitely something to pay close attention to, because Wednesday is the most busy day when it comes to travel in the United States of the year. So you definitely want to pay close attention to how this storm system moves, where you likely will experience snowfall as well as heavy rainfall just to the south, which could bring impacts and delays when it comes to your flight. So you want to keep tabs on this storm system as this continues ahead towards the northeast, but be prepared for heavy snowfall right over the interior northeast, anywhere between 3 to 6 inches, potentially more than that in the higher elevations. If we were to take a look at what the European model is forecasting when it comes to snowfall in the northeast, so if we were to move forward with the forecast, we do see that the European model expects a large area of 3 to 6 inches of snow, which is definitely enough to cause havoc on the roadway. So you want to make sure you take the necessary precautions. And then we do see in the higher elevations, you could experience over 6 inches of snow, especially in the interior portions of Maine, where the temperatures will be the coldest, and the period of snow will be the most prolonged. So you definitely want to watch out in a lot of these areas in the interior northeast. But moving on to what the GFS model is forecasting. GFS model is forecasting a very similar scenario when it comes to the northeast. So that gives you a high amount of confidence that this forecast will likely come for fruition. Taking a look at what the GFS model is forecasting when it comes to snowfall, we do see the snowfall is a little bit more scattered from further southward. The GFS model doesn't expect as much cold air to exist right around southern upstate New York and the Pocono Mountains, but you still could experience anywhere between 1 inch to 2 inches of snow in these areas. So you want to watch out for that. And who knows, maybe this could move as far south and west south and east into the northern portion of New Jersey. So you definitely want to pay close attention to this. You should expect anywhere from, I'll say, around 3 to 5 inches of snow in these areas. And then in the higher elevations, expect 6 to 10 inches of snow. So definitely keep that in mind. But now, moving on to our next potential snowstorm that's expected to move through the Midwest. If we were to take a look at that, this is in the more long-term future, so there's still a lot more time to really iron out this forecast. So moving past this first snowstorm, we're going to see that there's going to be another low moving through the Pacific Northwest that's going to bring plenty of cold air behind it, just like this snowstorm, and that's going to create just enough of an unstable environment for a pretty large pocket of snow to develop. And this could impact the more populated cities such as Denver. This could potentially impact Milwaukee, as well as Chicago could get involved with some snowfall, as we do see there's going to be just enough instability. The GFS model is less lenient on the instability being as strong for the snow to be as significant. So in this area, you would experience maybe around 1 to 3 inches of snowfall. Mainly because the GFS model doesn't expect that much instability and then fizzles out this storm by the time we approach the Saturday, November 25th timeframe, where by the time this approaches Chicago, it's not much of anything. It could encounter another pretty big boost in instability. By the time this approaches the Ohio River Valley, there's going to be another low just north of this low pressure system that could bring just enough of a northwesterly flow to revive this storm as it continues ahead further eastward. But just like the last snowstorm, it seems like there's going to be a ridge that's going to be a little bit too strong for the snow to move that far southward, and to the point where even the interior northeast doesn't experience much snow out of this. There could be lake effect snow, however, in the more long-term future. But moving on to what the European model is forecasting when it comes to this snowstorm, the European model is expecting a more significant snowstorm, and not only that, behind that storm system, we could potentially see much more. We could potentially see an Arctic blast moving through the northeast thanks to a strong northeast westerly flow that this storm could induce, where we do see the storm is a lot more powerful. This would bring definitely a lot more snowfall to the Midwest and over Denver and into Des Moines as well. You could experience more snowfall, and this could bring heavy snowfall right over Chicago as well, as we clearly see this storm is a lot more powerful. The millibar pressure is dropping down to 998 millibars, and we see a much more powerful area of cold air moving southward into the Midwest, which could bring temperatures very well below average over this area, and could potentially induce our next major snowstorm for maybe the Midwest and Northeast, because whenever we see a pretty big Arctic blast like this during the winter time frame, it could be only a matter of time before the Arctic blast encounters an unstable environment for potentially a major snowstorm to develop. So I wouldn't rule that out in the more long-term future by the time we approach the very late November into early December timeframe, as we do see some moisture and instability going on right over the southeast at this time, and we even see some snow right over western Texas. And I wouldn't be surprised that in the more long-term future, this could potentially be our next significant snowstorm. And we do see by Tuesday, November 28th, this is a very significant snowstorm for Texas, where Dallas is getting involved with very heavy snowfall. Again, this is very far out in the future, so take it with a major grain of salt. There's still a lot of time to iron out the forecast, and it's still uncertain how much of a polar vortex we're going to see by the time we approach the late November timeframe, because the GFS model is taking a storm system that's a lot weaker and a northwesterly flow that's a lot weaker than the European model. So it's still unknown at this time how powerful not only this snowstorm will be, but potentially our next snowstorm could be for the United States. So definitely stay tuned for more updates. We won't get a definitive answer, I'll say, until maybe the Friday, November 24th timeframe, just after Thanksgiving. Once the storm system moves ashore onto the United States, that's when we'll get a good idea of how much cold air and instability the low pressure system will encounter. But for the Midwest, it seems likely that there will at least be some sort of snowfall, and the trajectory as well as the amount of snowfall still has yet to be seen. Really all depends on the amount of ridging just to the east of this storm system, and really just how strong northwesterly flow will be just behind this storm system, and that will really what really will determine that is the strength of this storm system as it approaches the Pacific Northwest. The stronger it is, the more likely we're going to see a more powerful storm system, and the more likely we're going to see the storm system take a northward track a lot more quickly than, let's say, a weaker storm system, because if this storm is stronger, then that will enhance the winds along the eastern half to the point where the southwesterly flow will be much stronger to push this storm system further northward a lot more quickly. So a lot of the areas further eastward might just more likely experience a rain event. But if this storm is weaker, then I'd expect that the snow would move a little bit further eastward, but it would be a weaker storm in that scenario. So definitely a lot to pay close attention to. But in terms of the forecasted amount of snowfall from both of the computer models, it seems like although it's a long-term forecast as of right now, the computer models have a decent amount of agreement regarding where exactly the heaviest snow will be. So this is in the very long-term future, and we clearly see that it would bring over 3 to 6 inches of snow over a large area of Nebraska, Kansas. This extends into Denver as well, which would be a pretty significant snowstorm, and even Chicago is right on the border between 3 to 6 inches and 1 to 3 inches. Keep in mind, this is assuming the precipitable rainfall to snowfall ratio is 1 inch would equate to 10 inches of snow, and that's definitely not always the case. Depending on how much moisture is in each snowflake, the ratio could definitely be different. And also this map is measuring pretty much the amount of snowfall that comes from the sky, not really that actually accumulates on the surface. And of course, it takes time for snowfall to cool down, for snowfall to cool down the surface and accumulate. So this is probably a little less than what you see right here, but it's still right around the ballpark in terms of what you should expect. There's still uncertainty with the forecast, so don't take this seriously just yet, but be aware of that possibility of a snowstorm moving through this area of the Midwest. And going back to what the GFS model is stating, like I said, the GFS model is forecasting a weaker storm system, and we clearly see that the snow does move further eastward thanks to the fact that it's a weaker storm system, but this still brings 3 to 6 inches of snow right over Nebraska and right over Milwaukee. You should expect 1 to 3 inches. So is Des Moines. So we're definitely gonna need to pay close attention to this over the next several days. So keep alert for a snowstorm moving through by the time we approach this Thanksgiving weekend right over the Midwest. So here's my current forecast when it comes to these next 2 snowstorms. So keep in mind, take this with a grain of salt, because especially for this Midwest snowstorm, it's in the very long-term future. So this forecast is certainly subject to change, but as it stands right now, this is what you should expect. For the Northeast, I'll say that the forecast is pretty certain at this time. You should expect a large area of 3 to 6 inches of snow in the higher elevations of the Adirondacks and the interior Northeast, 3 to 6 inches in right around the Mount Washington area and extending into northern Maine, where the snow should be the worst for you guys and the heaviest, as well as the fact that the temperature will be the coldest in that area. So we need to watch out for potentially major impacts when it comes to snowfall in the higher elevations. And then for the Pocono Mountains, including Scranton, you should expect right around 1 to 3 inches, which is still something you want to be alert of, especially for potentially your Thanksgiving commute. So definitely pay close attention to that. And then taking a look at how the forecast stands for the Midwest right now, I would expect 3 to 6 inches of snow right over Chicago and Milwaukee. This is still subject to change, so definitely stay tuned for more updates. And then for Denver, you should expect 3 to 6 inches of snow as well. And then for Nebraska, this includes Nebraska and Kansas as well. So definitely keep this in mind over the next few days once the forecast does become more certain. But that's it for now, guys, and I thank you guys for watching.